Walk into any McDonald's today and you'll see a name on a bronze plaque: Ray Kroc. He is called the founder, but look at the sign outside. It doesn't say Crocs, it says McDonald's. This is the biggest business empire on Earth, yet the men who actually built the machine are almost totally forgotten. They were the architects of efficiency. They created a system that changed how every human being eats. They were geniuses of the kitchen. But if they were the ones who invented the future, why did they end up with a single check while someone else took the crown? We're diving into the untold story of Richard and Maurice McDonald. It is a story of perfection and power. It is a story of how they were systematically erased from their own legacy. The story doesn't start in a kitchen. It starts in a cold, grey factory town in New England. Their father, Patrick, gave 42 years of his life to a shoe factory. He worked hard and he climbed the ladder until he became a shift manager. Then, one day, his loyalty was rewarded by being fired. The factory let him go with no pension and no thank you. He was too old to find a new job and too poor to stop working. Dick and Mac watched their father break after a lifetime of labor. That moment changed their entire outlook. They made a pact right then. They would become millionaires by the age of 50. They vowed to never let an employer control their future again. They headed west to California in the 1920s. They tried to make it in Hollywood. They moved heavy sets at movie studios for $25 a week. They eventually saved enough to buy a movie theater, but the timing was disastrous. The Great Depression hit and the theater went bust. People couldn't afford to watch movies, and they could barely afford to buy bread. The brothers realized a hard truth. Movies are a luxury people skip. Food is a necessity they can't. They opened a tiny hot dog stand called the Air Dome. It was lean, cheap, and successful. They moved to San Bernardino in 1940 and bet it all on a new drive-in. The new restaurant was called McDonald's BBQ. It was an instant hit. They had 20 car hops in uniforms and a menu with 25 different items. They were making $40,000 a year in profit. Most people would call that a dream. The brothers called it a headache. The business was successful, but it was also a mess. The car hops were young and unreliable. They spent more time flirting with customers for tips than they did delivering food. This slowed down the parking lot and cost the brothers money. The menu was even worse. It was full of slow-cooked meats that required skilled cooks. There was too much waste and too much chaos. Plus, the drive-in started attracting the wrong crowd. Teenagers and troublemakers were scaring away the stable families. The brothers decided to look at their numbers. They did a deep dive into what people actually bought. They found something shocking. Nearly 80% of their sales came from one single item, the hamburger. They were maintaining a massive, expensive system for food that people were largely ignoring. Most owners would just try to change a few things. Not Dick and Mac. In the fall of 1940, they did the unthinkable. They closed their profitable restaurant. They fired their staff and took down their signs. They spent 3 months redesigning every single inch of the operation. They were not just fixing a kitchen, they were building a factory that happened to sell food. But brothers needed to see the future before they built it. They went to a local tennis court and drew the entire kitchen layout in chalk. They brought their employees out there and had them act out the process of making a meal. It looked like a dance. One person made the patty, another toasted the bun, another added the sauce. The brothers stood on the sidelines with stopwatches and watched every single step. If a cook had to take more than 2 steps to reach the pickles, it was too slow. They would erase the chalk lines and redraw the kitchen until every movement was perfectly efficient. This was industrial engineering applied to lunch. They were looking for something called mudder, which just means waste. Waste of time, waste of motion, waste of space. When the kitchen was finally built, it was a stainless steel masterpiece. They did not just use standard tools, they invented their own. They had a custom ketchup gun that clicked out the exact same amount of sauce every single time. They used a special grill that held heat better, so the burgers cooked faster. Everything was designed for speed and volume. They even fired the dishwashers. By using paper bags and plastic cups, they removed the need to clean anything. Customers had to walk up to a window to order because there were no more car hops. This new speedy service system was a total revolution. Because they cut out so much waste, they could drop the price of a hamburger to just 15 cents. That was about half of what their competitors charged. It was high-quality food for a price anyone could afford. People lined up around the block just to see the machine in action. They could get a meal in 60 seconds instead of 30 minutes. The brothers had finally created their gold mine. The brothers had the perfect kitchen, but now they needed the perfect building. They wanted something that would stand out to drivers on the new highways. They hired an architect named Stanley Meston to design it. They gave him a choice. He could take a flat fee for the work or a tiny commission on every restaurant they built in the future. Meston took the flat fee. It was a decision that probably haunted him for the rest of his life. The building he designed was functional, but Richard McDonald felt it was too boring. He wanted something that screamed for attention. He insisted on adding 2 giant, neon-lit yellow arches to the sides of the roof. The architect hated the idea, but Richard would not budge. These arches were not just for show, they were a beacon for hungry families. When you looked at the building from an angle, those 2 arches joined together to form a perfect letter M. It was the most successful accidental branding in history. The brothers were now making a fortune. They bought new Cadillacs every year and lived in beautiful homes. They'd achieved their goal. They were millionaires who only had to work 8 hours a day. They did not want to build a national brand or manage thousands of employees. They were happy. They were comfortable. They had no idea that a man with a much darker hunger was about to walk through their doors. That man was Ray Kroc. He was 52 years old and mostly a failure. He had spent years bouncing between jobs as a jazz pianist, a flower seller, and a real estate agent. Now he was peddling milkshake machines that could mix 5 drinks at once. He hated it. He was just another salesman looking for a shortcut to wealth. Then a single order changed everything. A tiny restaurant in San Bernardino ordered 8 machines. That meant 48 shakes at a time. Kroc had to see this for himself. He drove across the country in 1954 to find the source of the order. When he arrived, he did not just see a burger stand, he saw a gold mine. He described himself as a latter-day Newton hit by an Idaho potato. The brothers had built a masterpiece of efficiency, but they were satisfied with what they had. They wanted their Cadillacs, their 8-hour workdays, and their peace. Maurice explicitly said that a national chain would just be one huge headache. Kroc didn't care about headaches. He wanted world domination. He talked them into letting him act as their exclusive agent. The contract was completely lopsided. Kroc would charge franchisees a fee of 1.9% of their gross sales. The brothers took 0.5% for doing almost nothing. Kroc kept the 1.4%. But he had to pay for all the expansion and support. He was doing all the heavy lifting while the brothers sat back in California. It was a partnership built on 2 different dreams. One wanted a comfortable life, the other wanted the whole world. By 1960, there were over 200 McDonald's stores across the country. They were doing $75 million in sales. On the outside, Ray Kroc looked like a king. On the inside, he was drowning. Because of the contract, Kroc's company was only making about $159,000 a year. He was barely breaking even, while the brothers were collecting their share with zero risk. The tension was at a breaking point. Kroc wanted to cut costs by using powdered milkshake mix. The brothers refused because they valued fresh dairy and quality. They had to approve every single change in writing, and they usually said no. Kroc was trapped until he met a man named Harry Sonneborn. Sonneborn was a financial expert who took one look at the books and gave Kroc a hard truth. He told Kroc that he was not actually in the hamburger business, he was in the real estate business. They created the Franchise Realty Corporation to change the game. Instead of just selling burger rights, the company would buy or lease the land under the restaurants. Then they would rent that land back to the franchisee with a huge markup. This gave Kroc the money and the power the brothers had tried to keep from him. If an owner did not follow Kroc's rules, he could take their land and their building. He didn't need the brothers to agree anymore. He had found the secret weapon to build his empire. By 1961, the tension between Ray Kroc and the brothers reached a breaking point. Kroc had built a real estate empire and he wanted total control. The brothers were tired of the constant fighting and were ready to get out. They gave Kroc a price of $2.7 million. They calculated this number perfectly so that after taxes, each brother would walk away with exactly $1 million in their pocket. Kroc was furious about the high price, but he eventually found the money. Then came the famous handshake. The brothers claimed Kroc promised them a 0.5% royalty on all future sales in perpetuity. Kroc said he could not put it in writing because it would mess up his bank loans. They shook hands on a promise that would be worth over $100 million a year today. But Kroc never paid a single cent of it. To make it worse, he opened a new McDonald's just 1 block away from their original store. He used the name they sold him to crush their business and drive them out. He even began calling himself the founder and erased their names from the corporate history books for decades. Maurice McDonald passed away from a heart attack in 1971. Some people believe the stress of being pushed out by Kroc played a role in his death. Richard lived much longer and reached the age of 89. He watched from a distance as his little burger stand became the biggest brand in the world. In 1984, the company finally gave him a small moment of respect. They served him the ceremony's 50 billionth hamburger at a hotel in New York City. Even after everything he lost, Richard said he had 0 regrets. He lived a quiet life in New Hampshire while Kroc dealt with the ulcers and the lawyers. The brothers got exactly what they asked for in 1961, but they lost the legacy of what they built. They invented the future, and someone else sold it to the world. The golden arches they drew on a piece of paper now stand over 40,000 restaurants. Their names are gone, but their machine still runs every single day. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into the empires that built our world.